We're on. All right, as promised, we have the interview today with Sue Langley, who is the Director of Operations and North America at Lloyds. And CATEX has been a big fan of Sue Langley back from her days at Hiscox with her initiative with the G6. So we'll have a little chat with her today about the news recently about the Lloyds Exchange. Sue, are you with us this morning?
I am indeed. You say all the right things as well.
Well, very good. Thank you. We have the very complimentary picture of you up that actually doesn't do you justice. But let me ask you a question. The banner headlines about the Lloyds Exchange led many people in the U.S. at least to think that, in fact, what had happened was the setting off of something parallel to what Superintendent Dinello was talking about in New York with the New York Insurance Exchange. And the word exchange seemed to be being used in much more of a bourse kind of connotation. And then from my understanding from reading careful reports of people who've attended your briefings in the old library at Lloyd's, the exchange is perhaps more properly categorized in an informational transmittal kind of sense rather than a bourse extent. Could you perhaps talk a little bit about that and maybe clear that up for us?
Sure, you're completely right. I mean, we have a Lloyds Exchange and we have a room downstairs where people come in and do face-to-face, day-to-day trading, as you know. This is more of a virtual exchange in terms of how do you support that environment right through the life cycle in terms of carrying the information that the market needs around the room or around the world electronically. So it's taking what we have and building on it. It's nothing new. It's not a launch, and no, it's not linked to the New York Exchange.
So to the extent the effort will be successful, what you're going to be doing is, as much as possible, replicating the processes already extant on the floor.
The interesting thing about this initiative is, I mean, you know, there's been previous initiatives in this space.
Yes, that whole group of alphabet soup acronyms. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're trying to avoid those. Those actually did try to impose or deliver a process and a way of working. What the Lloyds Exchange is actually doing is just carrying the information, and it doesn't impose a way of working on the market or on any individual company at all. Because one of the issues, or one of the advantages we actually have in Lloyds, is that we've got multiple players with different business objectives, with different business models, and who operate in different geographies. And it's very difficult to put a one-size-fits-all, I'm sure, as you can imagine, process. Mm-hmm. So taking a completely different approach, what the Lloyds Exchange actually aims to do is say, okay, the process and how you work is entirely down to you, but the one common denominator is the information that everyone uses in the market, and we are going to impose electronic standards on the information to be carried and also the means by which to carry it.
Well, let me ask a question then that I think is sort of begging to be asked. Lloyd's has a very capable team in place now with Richard Ward, with yourself, and some others, people who have very good policy backgrounds as well as, in many instances, very proficient IT backgrounds. If you're going to afford that kind of freedom to the participants, doesn't that then naturally also extend to the, I guess, potential changes in any subsequent regulatory developments down the line? I mean, if you're going to be able to allow people to transact business in any way they wish, so long as they use the proper information standards, I mean, you're really making it ready now for Lloyd's to change as the future forces it to change, perhaps to better compete with Bermuda and elsewhere.
I think the two are actually quite separate. The regulatory environment is tightly governed here, as you know, tightly governed on a global basis. And just because we're permitting the way that, when I say the way that you carry out business, I mean the way that you transact business and the way that you process business, not the geographies in which you write and the licenses under which you write. You're right, I understand where you're going with that question. You're right that it actually potentially starts to open up possibilities. But that's a long way down the line, and the possibilities around how that can process, not the type of business you write.
I would be remiss if I also didn't ask about Ruchicon. Are you, I guess from the layman's perspective, if you will, if you look at this and you see the Lloyds exchange, you see the Ruchicon effort, and you see what Superintendent Dinello is talking about in New York about reviving the New York Insurance Exchange, I mean, how does the Lloyds exchange fit into this? Or is it something more along the lines of you folks taking the bull by the horns and wresting the Lloyds market into the 21st century, and if everybody else falls into place, great. Oh, I can imagine.
Very good question. I think that's a very good question. I mean, if I take the Lloyds exchange first of all, it's one of the strengths of Lloyds is that we've got huge diversity in our participants. But what Lloyds centrally does well is, apart from obviously maintaining the global licenses and in terms of the cost of capital, making it very attractive to write business here, is it sets guidelines and franchise guidelines and standards under which to operate. The Lloyds Exchange essentially is stepping into that space and saying, these are just electronic standards. If you want to work in the Lloyds market, these are the electronic standards you have to conserve, you have to follow. The Ruchicon initiative is along the same lines, and that's focusing on accounting. It's claims of Swiss strength. We welcome this initiative, and I think there was some confusion at first when they were both announced, saying, well, is one going to compete with the other? Absolutely not. Neither of us has got the desire to do that. The Ruchicon initiative pilot is running till 2010. We have someone from their group on our steering group and vice versa. And we're making sure that we follow exactly the same pool standards. So assuming, or when, both pilots are a success, the two can just be walked together. We have no interest in duplicating anything that Ruchicon do, and they have no interest in duplicating anything we do. So I think those fit very well. The New York Insurance Exchange is a different beast, if you like, because that's not around a technology or a standard. That's around introducing more of a local subscription model within the US environment, and that's really driven, as you say, by the US and by Dinello. So we are part of that working group, but the two aren't linked.
And I guess one final question: How has it been received to date? When we were chatting before we went on the air, you mentioned that the response has actually been a groundswell.
Yeah, I've been so encouraged by this. You know that the London market in the past, you've just mentioned the alphabet soups and the acronyms and the projects that have gone before this. But I think there's a real culture change. There's a real shift in feeling here in the London market. And I think with things like electronic claims and accounting assessment, people are used to now starting to do things in a different way. And I think because this initiative is so simple, it really is very basic. Because it's so simple, people have taken to it because they can see the benefit, i.e. we're not imposing a way of working, we're just facilitating or supporting the current way of working, eventually all through the life cycle. Because the one thing we have, diversity is great, but to bring diversity together, you've got to have a standard, you've got to have an information standard. So my initial fear in year one, or initial focus, was going to be how are we going to make sure we drive enough uptake. We've already filled the first 3 pilot phases. The first 9 months we're running in steps of 3 months. We've now got over about 80% of the managing agents signed up. So I've now moved from sign up to looking at the information drop, so i.e. what information do I have to put on this exchange and how quickly that gives the market the most benefit. And so that's really encouraging.
Oh, that's very good. That's very good. And this is something that once implemented will extend beyond simply Lloyds at 1 Lime Street. It will hook into your global operations, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, all Lloyd's business should be carried on it. And as you know, the company market are participating too here in London. We've got 7 companies who are part of the pilot. So we'll focus on that, get it up and running, and then we'll see.
Okay. Well, congratulations on at least the effort. I noticed you rolled out a number of heavy hitters for the inaugural debut, just making positive comments to the press about it, and that was impressive alone. So we wish you the best, and we'll keep in touch with you on it. Sue Langley, thank you for your time today.
Nice to speak to you.
Our pleasure.